Welcome to the Daily Fantasy 5 for this Thursday, June 20th. This is episode 122 of the Daily Fantasy 5. We're bringing you the 5 things you need to know every day in the world of fantasy sports. It's a big show today. We've got the NFL draft coming on tonight. I'll talk about the fantasy implications of that. We had a trade in the NBA. We have some baseball stories, and we're going to do running backs number 5 through 9 on my top 20 running back board for fantasy football. So a lot to get to today, and we'll do all that right after a word from mathradio.com, where you can go to pick up an online math course for as little as $9.99 to help your child ages 7 through 17 get better grades in school, score higher on exams, and even get into college. Once again, that is www.mathradio.com. All right, let's start off with the trade in the NBA. So Mike Conley was traded from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Utah Jazz last night for Jay Crowder, some other players, Kyle Korver, and I think one other player. And I think 2 draft picks. They received the Jazz first-round pick tonight and a future draft pick that is heavily protected. So what does this trade do as far as fantasy purposes go? Well, Mike Conley should be just as productive in Utah as he was in Memphis. He should still put up all the good stats that you're used to getting from Mike Conley. Excuse me. 1 second. I have a frog in my throat. So Conley should still be very valuable as far as fantasy goes. And it leaves a big hole at point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, which pretty much says that they'll be drafting Ja Morant. And we will talk about him later on. Let's get to the 2 baseball stories. Scherzer, we talked to you about him the other day. He had a broken nose in batting practice. Well, he doesn't care about broken noses. He went out there, had 10 strikeouts, and gave up no runs. So very nice work by Max Scherzer. The Dodgers' Rich Hill is moving to the IL. He had forearm discomfort. He's been very good this year with 4 wins and a 2.55 ERA. He had 61 strikeouts in 53 innings. He will have an MRI later on today. All right, let's continue the talk. And we're going to do a little NBA draft preview. There's really only 2 guys that matter in this draft, in my opinion, and he is Zion Williamson and Ja Morant. Zion should be a very good fantasy player for the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't know if he can crack the top 50, but he should be able to score a lot of points, rebound, and block some shots for you. I actually like Ja Morant a little bit better from a fantasy perspective. I didn't see a ton of him in college. I think I just saw the 2 games of him in the actual playoffs in the NCAA tournament. And I mean, he looked very good. He looked like a Westbrook style player to me, someone who's going to be going after those triple doubles, putting up stats every game, especially on a bad team like Memphis. I feel like he could be a really valuable player. Now, will he get enough steals and blocks to stay relevant? I don't think it really matters. I think he'll have the points. I think he'll have the assists, and I think he will have the rebounds. At least he did in college on a bad team. I think he'll do the same thing with a bad team in Memphis. So I do like Ja Morant as my number 1 fantasy player coming out of this draft, even though Zion Williams is obviously the best player. All right, with all that being said, we are going to get to my reliable running backs today. We're going through running backs 5 through 9. These are all guys who are going to be picked towards the end of the first round in your fantasy draft. And I think they all have they're reliable. They have high floors, not low ceilings, but they're probably not going to be in your top 4 or top 3 fantasy performers, but they'll do well. You won't be upset at the end of the year. So let's start off with number 9. We are talking about Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb finished 16th last year, and I just can't help myself. I love the Browns this year. My biggest crush on this team is on Mr. Chubb. For half of the season, Nick wasn't even used last year. He had 16 carries before week 7 total. That's not average per game. That's total before week 7. Yet he managed to finish as the 16th best overall running back. The guy is a beast. The Browns' offense should be explosive this year, and Chubb is really the only option right now as Hunt is suspended and Duke Johnson wants off the team. So Chubb also caught 20 passes on 29 targets. It's not like he can't catch the ball. They just didn't really throw to him last year. I think he receives more targets, more carries. I think he is a stud this year and easily a RB1. All right, coming in at number 8 for me is Melvin Gordon. He finished 7th last year among fantasy running backs. Gordon's never scored above 260 points in a season. We're talking fantasy points right here, right? But he's averaged over 16 points per game in the last 3 seasons. So he is reliable as long as he's on the field, but he's not really a top-end number 1 type of guy. Melvin had a 7-game scoring streak last year, which he gave a huge boost to his season totals. He was a touchdown machine for a long time. He also ranked 16th in targets among running backs. That keeps his floor very high. However, Gordon is not always Mr. Consistency. In the past 4 seasons, he has only played every game 1 time, and he's missed at least 2 games every other year. So the big question with Gordon is consistency. How many games is he going to give you in a season? Expect him to remain a back-end RB1 this year. I know some people have him up there with the top players. Not me. I still worry about that injury history. I think he still plays only, between 13 and 15 games, and that will hurt you. That 1 week that he doesn't play, it might cost you a week, might keep you out of the playoffs. If it comes in the playoffs, it could end your season. So I don't really trust Melvin Gordon. If he is my number 1 running back, I want to have somebody else reliable in there at number 2. All right, our next guy I think is very reliable. He is David Johnson. He finished 10th last year, and the Cardinals were an absolute dumpster fire last year. So 2019 brings with it a new coach and a new quarterback. That should be good for David Johnson. This ranking represents my belief that things can't possibly get worse for the guy. He still managed to finish the fantasy season in 10th among running backs, and he had 11th in targets among running backs. That should keep his floor, again, very high, just like it does with Melvin Gordon. The new coaching regime should involve Johnson in the passing game even more, and I love that. It's an air raid type offense where Johnson should see a lot of passes. Not only dump offs and screens, but he can actually get out there and run routes as well, which is a good thing for David Johnson owners. Top 10 finish for David Johnson seems written in stone. I don't see any reason why he would not finish in the top 10 this year, except they do have a terrible, terrible, dismal offensive line. So that's really the only thing holding back Johnson at this point. He's the one guy out of this group that I think could end up in the top 4 if everything breaks right for David Johnson. But I'm going to leave him at number 7 on my list. Number 6, I have James Conner. He finished 6th last year as well. Conner left the Steelers fans feeling pretty good about the departure of Le'Veon Bell. And Conner even had 71 receiving targets last year, which raises his floor a ton, even more than guys like David Johnson and Melvin Gordon, which is why I had him here at 6th. He just seems more reliable than all the other guys. I know he's only had 1 year of production. I don't care. He seems like a very reliable stud running back to me. Antonio Brown and Jesse James have also left the team, which should provide James Conner, with even more chances in the passing game. 4th round rookie Benny Snell may vulture a few carries down the line from Conner, but that might not be a bad thing overall if James can stay fresh towards the end of the year, as he wore down a little bit this past season. All right, our final running back of the day is James White. Now, I know a lot of people are going to question this pick. James White at RB number 5 this year. Well, I love James White. Now, I won't be drafting him in the first round of a draft, right? You can get this guy in the 5th or 6th round, but I still think he's going to finish the year as a top 5 running back. He is my best of the rest of the guys that are not elite. So James White, this isn't crazy. He finished 8th last year, okay? Just because I have James White as my 5th running back, of course, does not mean I will take him in the first round. I want to target him in the 5th, 6th round. He's being drafted in the 6th round in most drafts. He is the best value you're going to find in all of fantasy football. If I can get him in the 5th round, I am doing backflips. Now, Rob Gronkowski, Cordell Patterson, and Chris Hogan are all gone. Brady's going to need to throw the ball to someone, and White finished last year with 123 targets, which was 2nd most among running backs. He's going to get even more targets this year. Even if you just want to consider him as a wide receiver who sometimes runs the ball, that's fine. He's going to have all kinds of production. He'll get plenty of receptions, plenty of targets. Even if he only runs the ball, 6, 7, 8 times a game, it's not a big deal because he might catch 10 passes. And especially in FanDuel, the format I like to play in where you're getting a half a point per reception, he's definitely a guy you want to target. If it's a PPR league, you've got to have this guy on your team. You might have to bump him up a little bit in your ratings on where you're going to draft him, but James White is my guy. That's where I'm planting my flag this year. I want him as my RB1, and it allows you to do a lot of different things at the top of the draft. You could go wide receiver in rounds 1 and 2. You could even take a quarterback in the 2nd round if you think Mahomes is going to have an amazing season. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. You could take a tight end early. You could take Cleese or whoever it is that you like in the 2nd, 3rd round. Just being able to know that you can grab James White in the 5th round and have him be your RB1 really makes your team more dynamic because you can do a lot of other things in the first 3 rounds and then grab somebody like, Tariq Cohen, Philip Lindsay later on, or even a Mark Ingram. And you can have a very nice running back tandem without grabbing a running back in the first or second rounds. It's just a strategy we'll talk more about later on. Okay, that's it for the Daily Fantasy 5 today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and tell a friend. Leave us a comment below. If you're listening to the show on a podcast, either iTunes, Spotify, or the Himalaya app, we would love it if you left us a 5-star rating, maybe even a review. That would be wonderful. And please visit mathradio.com, where you can pick up an online math course for your child for as little as $9.99. It gives you a lifetime membership. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with the rest of our running backs. Bye, everybody.